Oh, no, I. Okay, so,
You need a motion.
I would
to-
look for a motion to go into closed session.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Kate.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Megan. We will do a roll call. Our acting, well, I guess our regular clerk could do the roll call, but. our
I can do
acting-
it.
We appointed an acting clerk just for administrative reasons here on this end, so Megan
Sounds good.
is the acting clerk. Go
That's right.
ahead.
Hopefully I do it right. Okay, roll call. Howery,
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Mooney,
Yes.
Fessler, yes.
Okay.
Right, now we can go over.
Then I will be closing the webinar. We'll open it back up again when you return to open session.
back in open session, and our first item this evening is a presentation on school board responsibilities and the roles of the superintendent. One of our attorneys, Shayna Lewis from Renning, Lewis and Lacey, is kind enough to come out and do a presentation for us. So Shayna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to share this information with you. I'm going to just preface this by telling you that the information that has been shared, the presentation that's about to be on the screen, is a lot of information. We aren't going to be able to get through all of it, but I wanted to put together something that you guys could have as a resource so that in the event that you're struggling or asking questions about the decisions that you're making, the activities that you're involved in, you have the ability to go back in order to issue spot, if you will, and identify, maybe I need to ask a little bit more about my relationship with this organization as it relates to my position on the board. Or maybe I need to think and ask some questions about my access to documents as a school board member. And so we're going to go through some of the information, but we are definitely not going to be able to cover everything. In addition, as Craig mentioned, I am your legal counsel. So I provide legal advice to the school district through primarily your administration, but periodically through members of the board, through your board president, and through presentations like this. This, however, is not legal advice in the sense of you are not protected with regard to the attorney-client privilege. We are not talking about things in a confidential setting. You have the ability to contact me through your administration or through your board president if you have a specific legal question that you want assistance answering. And I'm happy to do that as a group. We could do that in closed session pursuant to an applicable closed session exemption. Or we could do that on an individual basis if it's something specific to you or your position, either on the board or related to your position on the board. I want to make sure that I put that out there now because we may be going through some things where you say to yourself, I have a question about how that relates to a decision I'm making or how that relates to a participation that I may have in a particular committee or what have you. Now is probably not the best time to ask that question, especially to the extent that you are looking for the protection of the attorney-client privilege, which you would be entitled to. So I just want to make sure that we're going to talk about these items generally. They are likely to spark some questions and conversations between board members and between, with yourself. To the extent that you want me involved in those discussions, talk to your administration, talk to your board president, and you can get me involved. Any questions before we begin? And I know we've got some people online. Hi, Tom. Hi, Bruce. I'm sorry that you can't be here in person. But you have the ability to ask questions or to comment. And as I mentioned before, if you have questions that are specific that you want to address later, we can certainly facilitate that. All right, so let's get started. Angie, if you can go to the first slide. I like to start these presentations, and I will tell you, I do these presentations for so many of my school districts. I work with, at last count, I think it's about 48 school districts across the state of Wisconsin in some way, shape, or form. And I do these presentations on a pretty regular basis for school boards, especially after a new school board is elected, after new school board members are elected, because these are specific responsibilities that may not be reviewed prior to your election or may not be reviewed shortly after in any kind of great detail. And so I want to make sure that we start kind of with the broad perspective. And that is the authority of Wisconsin public school districts. Prior to 1995, Wisconsin public school districts were what we called limited authority or enumerated powers entities. What that meant was anytime a school district wanted to do something, for example, if a school district wanted to offer mental health services to the students, the school district, through administration or through the board president, would contact legal counsel and say, can we do this? Are we allowed to offer mental health services to our students? And your school attorneys would go to the statutes, We'd page through and try to find the authority that was explicitly provided for in the statutes that said that yes, in fact, a school district can offer mental health services to students. If we didn't find that specific authority in the statutes, we'd go to case law, we'd go to administrative regulations, or we'd try to extrapolate from what was already there in order to try to help you find the authority to offer mental health services or whatever the situation was that you wanted to do. If we couldn't find it, and we couldn't make a good argument that it existed in some other way, we'd call the lobbyists, and we'd ask the lobbyists to encourage the legislature to amend the statutes in order to provide that authority to school districts. Apparently that got a little old after a while, and by 1995 the legislature was a little irritated that we kept coming back over and over again. And the legislature also recognized that in the state of Wisconsin we have a great support for, a great endorsement of the local powers of our municipalities, including school districts. And so what they did is they flipped everything. And in 1995, with Wisconsin Act 27, suddenly school districts became expanded authority entities or broad powers entities. And they adopted a number of statutes that essentially said that a school district, a school board leading that school district, has the authority to do all things reasonable to promote education. So now, in the post-1995 world, when you want to offer mental health services to your students or take any other kind of action, and you call your school attorney, we're looking for a prohibition in the statutes, or we're looking for conditions that you need to meet prior to making that decision in order to determine whether you're allowed to offer mental health services or do anything else for that matter. And for the most part, the answer will be yes, you can do whatever is reasonable to promote education within your community, within the state, within the country, as long as it isn't prohibited, or as long as you follow whatever those preconditions are to making that decision. Angie, if we can move on to the next slide. In Wisconsin Statute 12012, and then the next slide, 12013, these are where we find the school board duties and school board powers. This demonstrates, and I'm not going to go through all of these long lists of authority that the legislature has provided to you, but you can see here this is what happened as a result of school districts being limited power authorities or limited or enumerated powers entities. Basically, we had to keep amending the statutes. Now these two statutes, the school board duties in 12012 and school board powers in 12013, now is where we find the preconditions or the requirements for what a school board can do and how. So for example, if we're looking at the powers of a school board in 12013, sub 1, that is where we find the obligation to adopt a classroom code of conduct, and the authority, not the obligation, but the authority to expel students. We also find that you have the ability to offer child care programs, and there are specific requirements that you need to meet in order to do so. You can lease school property, you can provide hunter education programs, and all of these powers, all of the duties, kind of identify what do you do if you wish to do this, if you wish to take on this responsibility. And so we find ourselves in a situation where the school board itself has the responsibilities to do whatever you'd like in order to promote education in the community, in the larger region, in the state, in the country. But you do have some primary responsibilities as the entity that governs or that oversees the school district. And we're going to go through some of those primary responsibilities of a school board. Some of these may seem intuitive, some of them are a little more, there's a little more nuance to them, and we'll explore that just a bit. The first primary responsibility of a school board is to first adopt and then embody the mission of the school district. In some cases, that mission is very simple. We want to provide a quality education to the students who attend school in our district. In other cases, you will adopt a more specific mission. For example, if you wanted to be the arts hub of Dane County, you might adopt a mission to indicate that the school district of McFarland is going to really look at our programs, look at our offerings in a way through a lens where we are looking to kind of be that arts hub. Maybe it's that you want to be the premier science school district in the area, and so you'll kind of focus on that. There may be a dual mission, there may be some sub-missions, but generally speaking, you as the school board get to decide kind of what is it that we're doing here in the district, and what does the mission say that then fulfills all of the other decision making. You have a primary responsibility of adopting policy. Policy is a very important responsibility of a school board, and you will find that even though you use the Neola policies, which are policies that are presented to you with several options available, even though that is a responsibility that you've to some extent delegated by virtue of having this vendor provide you with content, you have a lot of responsibilities in determining what those policies actually say. And the way in which you adopt policy is how you communicate to your students, to your community, to your staff, and most important, to your administration, who are the kind of the front lines of the individuals who are implementing the decisions that you make. So if you want, for example, and I don't want to keep talking about student discipline, but it's a good example. If, for example, you want to make sure that it is clear that in the school district of McFarland, when someone is in possession of drugs or drug paraphernalia, that is going to be an expellable offense that you want the administration to bring to the board with a recommendation for expulsion, you do that through policy. Because by policy, you're communicating that to the administration, communicating that to students, to the community, that this is not something you will tolerate and this is the consequence. And then as a result, you will find yourself in a situation where those cases will be brought to you. The opposite is also true. In the event that you indicate that you don't want to see those cases brought before you as an expulsion recommendation, you would do so, you would make that decision by policy, communicating to your administration and the rest of the stakeholders about what it is that you determine is an expellable offense. Policies govern, as you probably have already noticed, all aspects of the school district environment, whether it's employment, student discipline, use of district facilities, open meetings, public records, all of it is governed by policy. And so to the extent that you want to see change within the school district environment, the board should start with determining, do we have a policy on that? And if so, what does our policy say? And does our policy actually fulfill or support the decisions that we want our administration to look at? We'll talk in just a bit about the administration's role with regard to policy making, but you guys are, as the school board members, really the entity that makes those policy decisions. You're decision makers. You are decision makers about a wide variety of issues, and we'll get into the specific subjects that you make decisions on. But you guys are decision makers, and you make those decisions at properly posted school board meetings. You are responsible for student achievement. While you guys are not necessarily in the classrooms and providing that direct education to students, the policies that you adopt, the programs that you support, the decisions that you make do in fact impact student achievement directly. And so when you are making decisions as a school board, you're going to want to take into account that student achievement is a primary responsibility that you have. You are the ones that adopt the graduation requirements, for example, and you address then student achievement through those decisions. You're responsible for the budget. While you are a common school district, which means that you get some input from the electors in the district, you are the entity that makes the final decision regarding the budget, including where money is spent, as well as how money is spent and how much money is spent. You are an employer. You will hear repeatedly people say that you employ one individual. The reality is you supervise one individual, that's your superintendent, but you employ many. You employ many employees. all of the school district employees are actually employees of the school district, meaning employees of the school board. You will find that there are two statutes that are very important to this distinction as the employer. Wisconsin Statute 11822, which governs teacher contracts, and 11824, which governs administrator contracts. Both of those statutes indicate that employees who hold those contracts cannot be hired or fired except by a majority of the full membership of the board. What that means is that you will never have a teacher or an administrator employed in this district without some kind of board action. Similarly, you will not have a teacher or an administrator fired in this district without some kind of board action. Your support staff are not subject to those same rules. Your support staff are able to be hired and fired by your administration, by policy. But for your administrators and your teachers, you are the decision maker with regard to employment. You're responsible for the public and political relations of the school district. Public relations meaning to the general community as a whole. Your political relations mean with regard to the village, with regard to the county, with regard to the state and to the federal government. And you guys do have a responsibility to work with those entities, also with other school districts. There are a number of intergovernmental agreements that are considered every year from between the school district and other municipalities. And so it is important that you continue to establish and cultivate and develop those relationships with the political entities as well as the public. You are an ethical leader. One of your primary responsibilities is to be an ethical leader in the district. That is extremely important because of the decisions that you will make as school board members. To the extent that your ethics are questionable, it makes it very difficult for you to sit in judgment of other people. Whether we're talking about students' discipline, we're talking about employment decisions, or other decisions where you are granting or taking things away. To the extent that it is questioned where your loyalties lie or why you are making a decision. Is it because of a personal agenda, or because of a personal relationship, or a personal financial interest? That can be quite challenging for a school district. And so I would encourage all school board members, and we'll talk very briefly about the code of ethics at the end, but all school board members should take into account their relationships and whether the relationships that they have implicate the ethical obligations of the school board members. You have a very important role as it relates to due process hearings. I talked a lot about student expulsions, employment decisions like a termination or a non-renewal, a contract non-renewal. You owe your employees and your students, when you are taking something away from them, you owe them due process. That is a constitutional right that they have, that you have a duty to provide to them if you are going to take something away from them. In order to do that, minimal due process requires us to provide the employees or the students with a hearing before an impartial body. And you, as the school board, are that impartial body. As a result of that, because of your need to be impartial, that doesn't mean that you don't know anyone involved, that doesn't mean you don't know anything about what's going to be brought before you. What it means is that you are only going to make a decision based on the information that is presented to you during that hearing, and not some of those extraneous facts or opinions that might be provided to you through other relationships. But because of that, it is important that school board members are reserving their rights to serve in that capacity by avoiding being involved in advocacy for students or staff members to this body, by avoiding being an investigator or someone who is kind of looking into matters that will ultimately come before the board, and that you avoid making statements outside of this body to indicate that you've already made your mind up or that you are unwilling to hear each side when it comes to some of these due process hearings. As a result of your role as an impartial tribunal, There may be times when you come to a school board meeting and you don't know much about the hearing that will be presented or the recommendation that will be presented. In a student expulsion hearing, in a teacher non-renewal or administrator termination hearing, it is very likely that you will have little to no information about the facts that occurred that then supported the recommendation that will come before you. That is designed to help you serve as that impartial body and not intended to keep anything from you or hide anything from you or actually to, not to prejudice you related to what will be coming before you. It really is to make sure that whoever is the target or the focus of that hearing has their right respected related to due process. And so there will be some times where you'll get some information, maybe a name, maybe some background information, maybe just just a warning that we're going to have to schedule this hearing later this month or later this week or whatever the situation might be. And you might want a lot more information before you get there. And the reason that your administration can't provide it to you is because of this responsibility. You also have the responsibility of supervising the district. And when I say supervising the district, I don't mean the day-to-day operations of the district. Nobody is giving you keys to the buildings and expecting you to kind of come in and observe what is going on. As an entity, it is your responsibility to make sure that things run correctly through your interactions with your administration and then filtering down to the other staff. And so your role as the overarching supervisor of the district is a very important role, but is a very different role than the responsibilities of your administration, which we'll go over right now. So your administration has really the opposite responsibilities. They are responsible for the day-to-day operations of the district. That's why they have keys to the buildings. That is why they are responsible for things that happen on a day-to-day basis that are occurring within the school district. They are your chief administrative, executive, and communications officers. They are managing the operations of the district, the educational operations, the instructional operations. They are the direct supervisors of the rest of your staff. As I mentioned before, the school board employs these individuals, but you are not the direct supervisor of those employees. That is what your administrators do and your other supervisors or directors. They're also responsible for evaluating your staff. And again, back to the policy making that you do, you communicate to your administration what you want them to do with regard to operations, curriculum, instruction, supervision, and evaluation of staff. You communicate to them through the policies that you adopt. Your administration is responsible for taking action in the absence of board policy, and that's important as well. Sometimes a board will choose to communicate to administration by not adopting a policy on a particular subject or on a particular issue, or delegating that authority within policy to the administration because you are identifying that that specific decision is more appropriate for the administration to make and exercise discretion. And so to the extent that there is an absence or a gap in policy that may be intentional, it may be exactly what it is that you are looking to do in order to empower your administration. And it may be that as you evaluate the situation moving forward, you decide this is an area where we do want to provide some guidance, or we want to provide some different guidance through the form of policy or other communications to administration. Your administration is responsible for preparing board agendas. Board agendas are the responsibility of the board, but your administration is in the best position to let you know when you need to be addressing certain things and what is ripe to come before you. For example, you may not know, but your administration is keenly aware of the fact that in your January meeting, you need to make a decision about space limitations for your open enrollment decisions. Your administration will make sure that those space determinations are on your January agenda. In the event that it is done in February or December, it's either too early or too late. And so those are the kinds of things that your administration is trained to be aware of and has experienced, and so they're intimately involved in the board agenda. There are policies that allow board members to impact or influence that board agenda, but to a great extent and through your policies, you've decided that your administration is involved in that. Your administration is also responsible for making numerous recommendations to the board. Again, because they are on the front line, they understand and appreciate what is going on in the districts. And so they may be coming to you with recommendations with regard to the organizational plan, with regard to policies, with regard to administrative positions and other positions, with regard to staff compensation or other operational requirements. It is a good idea to remember that you hired these people for a reason. It's because they have the experience, it's because they have the training, it's because they have the education, and because they are the ones who should be hearing directly from your staff, from your students, from your community about what it is that they want to see within the confines of the school district. And so taking the recommendations that they have doesn't mean that you rubber stamp everything that the administration tells you, and certainly does not replace the obligation, not just the opportunity, but the obligation to ask questions of the administration to make sure you're getting all of the information you need to make decisions. But certainly taking into account that your administration was hired for a reason, and that is to provide you with a lot of the information that you need in order to make those decisions. So let's talk a little bit about the board-district administrator relationship. This is the most important relationship between the board and the district administrator. As I mentioned before, you are an employer of many, but you supervise one. You supervise your district administrator directly. And so mutual trust is certainly an important factor in that relationship. In the event that you have questions about the information that he's providing to you, you need to ask them, and you need to feel comfortable asking them, and he needs to feel comfortable answering those questions. It is my suggestion, and certainly I've worked with enough school districts where the relationship was very positive, and many where the relationship was not. It is very important that you start from the perspective of relying upon one another and trusting that and giving each other the benefit of the doubt, but understanding that you're going to have some critical discussions, you're going to need to ask a lot of questions, and you have the right to expect answers. As a group, you are going to want to make sure that you are getting the information that you need when you need it and prior to the time when you're making a decision. If you don't have the information that you need, it's important that you ask for it and make sure that the administration understands what it is that you need in the future to be able to make decisions that are important for the district. For example, as we talked about that January meeting where you're making space limitations, letting your administration know prior to that meeting what information you need in order to feel comfortable accepting a recommendation is very important. Making sure that the administration is not surprised with a question or where you've essentially kind of dropped a bomb on the administration, that you need all of this information at the time in which you're going to be making the decision, can create a lot of trouble and can create a lot of distrust. So communication is a very important aspect of the relationship, not just trust, but communication. The primary duty, as I mentioned before, of the board is to establish policy, and the primary duty of the district administrator is to administer those policies. And so you want to make sure that you're giving the administrator latitude to determine the best method of implementing those policies, and then talking about where you see successes or failures and figuring out how to then address those, either by giving more latitude or by firming up some of the specifics that you need from the administration. In the interest of promoting and maintaining a healthy and productive environment, there should be a good relationship between the district administrator and the board president, so that the two of them are having some discussion about not just the operations of the district, but to the extent that the board is either helping or hindering that process. To the extent that there is a complaint about a board member or about the district administrator, your policies indicate that involving your legal counsel in order to assist you is a very important role. Because again, as I mentioned before, the board is not an investigative body. In order to preserve your right to serve as that impartial tribunal, it is a bad idea for a board member to be out there kind of compiling information about the administration. It's something where you would work with either my office or another attorney in order to, or another investigator to gather that information as opposed to doing so yourself. It's important to remember that the board is responsible for determining the success of the district administrator in meeting the goals that are established by the board through those annual evaluations and the district administrator's performance goals. It's a good idea to start talking about that early. You are going to want to make sure that you are aware of the timeline related to your administrator's contract, and then your responsibilities for establishing an evaluation, establishing goals, and then implementing the evaluation and goals. I can tell you that in working with a number of school districts, there's often too much time goes by where you're not necessarily communicating in writing or creating documentation to both commend or to criticize. And so making sure that you're being very clear about what you expect, and then also about what it is that you are comfortable with or not comfortable with relative to your administration is very important, and having that open communication really does help to aid in the success of both the relationship as well as your district administrator. All right, so let's move on to the authority of individual school board members. This can be confusing in the sense of, as a school board member, it feels as though I just went through all of the powers and the duties that you have as an entity that don't actually apply to you as an individual. So, as I mentioned before, in 1995, the legislature changed the entity responsibility of a school district and indicated that you're responsible for, or that you have the authority to do anything reasonable to promote education. That's as an entity, that's as a board. On an individual basis, you only have powers to vote and to participate as a member of that governmental body, unless, of course, the governmental body has delegated explicit powers to you, either through policy or through the statutes provide some officers with some specific duties. So kind of put simply, as a member of the body, when you are acting together during a properly posted meeting, or when you are acting in your capacity with delegated authority, you have all the power of the statutes. But on an individual basis, without that delegated authority or without acting as a group, you have very little power and a lot of responsibilities. And so it's important to understand that a lot of the time this is not about someone intentionally trying to exceed the authority that's provided to them. It's often done as someone just simply trying to help. And I'll give you an example here. I've got a school district that a couple of years ago went out for a bid on health insurance. And there was a school board member, a retired gentleman who used to be in the health insurance industry. And he was aware of the fact that the school district was going out for bid on health insurance, and understood that the administration was putting together the RFP materials. Administration is putting together the RFP materials, and this gentleman decided to help. And so he contacted a number of individuals who are representatives for health insurance companies across their area, and kind of previewed the fact that there was going to be this RFP that would be coming out, indicated that there was going to be a deadline, and kind of went over the demographics that he understood existed in the district relative to health insurance. He does that, doesn't tell anyone he's done that, and then the RFP is issued, and it's a little different than what he had portrayed to the couple of people that he had contacted and encouraged to respond. The school district's administration then gets a number of calls from these people he's had phone calls with, and asks for clarification because things are a little different than what he had portrayed to them. The administration realizes, of course, that he had called a couple of people and not necessarily everyone who was going to be responding to this RFP, so they're a little concerned about the perception of unfairness as it related to the other individuals who didn't have that preview, and the individuals who did have the preview who weren't necessarily given the correct information. Long story short, the school district ended up pulling the RFP, reconvening and addressing this kind of a situation, and then reissuing the RFP after there had been some kind of cleanup relative to this gentleman's help. And we had a conversation with the gentleman, and he realized very quickly that he had a lot to offer. He had a lot of good information, and he obviously had a lot of passion for this subject, but he just wasn't using it in the right way. Had he told the administration, told the other school board members of his interest, perhaps he could have been appointed to a committee or given a specific role or responsibility relative to this task. It was a learning experience for everyone involved, but it's a good illustration of a situation where this was with the best of intentions that this gentleman was trying to help. But he realized very quickly after reviewing this information with him that an individual school board member doesn't have any power to make offers, to communicate information, to get involved in the administrative tasks. And doing so can have some significant negative results. And so to the extent that you are interested in a subject or that you have a passion, making sure that your fellow board members are aware of it and perhaps give you the opportunity to formally be involved in a particular task or committee, it is the best way to avoid that kind of issue. In addition, as we mentioned, you want to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a situation where you're inadvertently investigating or gathering information that would negatively impact your opportunity to serve as that impartial tribunal member. With regard to the powers of an individual school board member, as I mentioned, they're limited, other than as a voting member of the body. But your responsibilities are plentiful. You have a responsibility to avoid conflicts of interest, which are detailed at the end of the outline, which, as I mentioned, we're not going to go through in any great detail today, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. It is your responsibility to respect policy and to acknowledge and identify that you have the right to change that policy as a group if it is not serving your needs. You have responsibilities related to the public records law. Every document that you create in your capacity as a school board member, and by the term document, I mean that includes electronic records. Every document that you create or that you receive in your capacity as a school board member is technically a public record. For those records that you create or receive on a device or through an account that is not district controlled, you are the records custodian for those records, and you have a responsibility to provide those records to the district if requested, and then to assist us in disclosing them as necessary under the public records law to the extent that we have a request that comes in. That can be pretty confusing if you are using your personal email accounts, if you are using a work-issued email account, or a personal social media account, to engage with your constituents, to engage with staff members, to engage with parents, and it can be pretty confusing when we have records requests that come in and pretty time-consuming in trying to fulfill those records requests. Over the next couple of years, you'll hear every once in a while we'll contact you because we've got a request that has come in for board communications that include those communications that you sent on your personal communication devices or through personal accounts. It is your responsibility to be responsive to those requests and to provide those records to us, even if you don't necessarily see that they should be disclosed. The best course of action, the best practice that I can encourage you to adopt is to only use your district-issued accounts and devices for your district business. Keep your social media separate, keep it personal, or if you have a business social media account or a business email account, use that only for your business. To the extent that someone inadvertently sends you something through a separate email account or on a separate device, forwarding that immediately to your district-issued account is the preferred way of dealing with this, so that when and if we get a request, we can do the search in the district's technology and avoid having to contact you and go through that process of obtaining those records to be responsive. The public records law has been used significantly over the past couple of years by individuals to gather information about the school district, to it's sometimes been weaponized by individuals who are anti-public education or who have other concerns regarding public education. And so we are seeing a significant uptick in public records requests. And in order to avoid just the time and energy of having to gather the records from outside entities, it's just a really good idea to try to use your district accounts as much as possible for your district business. You have responsibilities related to the open meetings law. Technically speaking, you have a responsibility to only attend meetings that are properly posted. And so becoming familiar with the open meetings law to the extent that it applies to your board meetings, committee meetings, closed sessions, things like that is a good idea. Asking questions is always a good idea. And then voting in the motions that are made relative to the adjourning the meeting or moving into closed session. Very important because that is a responsibility that you have. And then you have a responsibility, as I mentioned before, of respecting policy, and that includes respecting the chain of command and the organizational chart. You have access to a lot of information in your capacity as a school board member. That said, you are also a citizen who has access to records through the public records law. And so you may end up in a situation where you are looking for records from the school district, and the school administration will ask you whether you are asking for those records in your capacity as a school board member or as a member of the public through the public records law. Board Policy 143.2 addresses school board members' access to records and other information. It recognizes the need for transparent and thorough communications between administration and the board, such that the administration is encouraged to make efforts to provide information pertaining to agenda items before meetings, disseminate requested documents to school board members upon request, gather documents responsive to school board members' requests, and consult with the board member to determine what it is that they're looking for, including if the records specific that are being asked for don't exist, but there may be other records that are responsive that do exist. It's important for school board members to remember that the administration has to report to each one of you. And so to the extent that you are requesting lengthy research or investigation from the administration is going to respond to you by asking if this is something that the board is looking for, or is this something that you are individually looking for. You can imagine if there is a situation where all of you are asking the administration for different records relative to different agenda items, that they could spend their entire month between board meetings or 2 weeks between board meetings trying to gather that information. And so you may be in a situation where your administration says, before we put together a lot of this information that you're asking for, let's convene as a group and figure out, does the board want this information? Is this helpful for the board to make its decision? It may be that we can refine the request. We can make sure that the information that is being provided is in fact helpful to the board. And it may be that you as an individual want information that the rest of the board does not. If that's the case, then we'll process your request as a public records request and provide you with that information under those procedures. But it's important to know that the administration does have a responsibility to make sure that you have access to records necessary to perform your role as board members, but that doesn't mean that you have access to everything. In addition, when you get access to things that are not available to the general public, you have a responsibility to make sure you're maintaining that information and the records themselves on a confidential basis. And so to the extent that you have access to someone's FMLA request, to a student's disciplinary record, to other kinds of confidential information, that's information that shouldn't be discussed at the supermarket, at the tavern, at the bowling alley, at a book group or anything like that. I've had a couple of situations where school board members have asked for information and it hasn't been readily apparent what it is that they're looking for or why. Had a school board member asked to see the disciplinary record of a student, and it turned out that the student had recently asked her daughter out on a date. That's not an appropriate reason to ask for access to student disciplinary records. But to the extent that you are interested in how it is that the district's administration is imposing suspensions, or how, what the situation is with regard to seclusion and restraint in your district, those are legitimate questions that you may want to have access to records to evaluate and discuss. And likely it is that the rest of your board members have similar questions, and it would be an appropriate agenda item to address. When you get inquiries from the public, sometimes you're in a situation where a staff member or community member will ask you for information. And as school board members, you want to be able to be responsive to the members of the public or to staff members. You don't want to feel like you don't know what's going on in the district, and you certainly don't want to come across as though you don't have that information or you're not being helpful. You guys are elected officials. You have a responsibility to your constituents. That said, you need to be careful about what information you're sharing with them. Obviously, confidential information should not be shared. And to a great extent, it's a good idea for you to make sure that you are directing those individuals, your employees, your community members, your students, your parents. You're directing them to the proper administrator in the district or the proper other staff member in the district who might be able to field their question and respond to their concerns. To the extent that you are gathering information, that puts your position, that puts you into the position of investigator. We want to avoid that. To the extent that you are advocating on behalf of a community member or a student or a staff member, you could put yourself in a situation where your position is adverse to the district, and that could create a lot of issues. My suggestion to you is anytime that you are provided with information or you are asked to assist someone with a problem or a concern, is you should start figuring out who the proper administrator is to field that particular concern. Someone has a question about their child's IEP, making sure that that gets to your special education director or to your special education administrators. If someone has a question about facilities, there's probably an administrator who's specifically responsible for access to facilities. Maybe that's Jeff Mahoney, maybe that's someone else. Making sure that you're directing them to that individual so that that administrator can assist them with their concerns. That doesn't mean that you have to remain completely aloof from the situation, that you can't follow up and say, hey, Erin, did you handle that? Jeff, did you handle that? And they'll be able to give you an A-OK or tell you that there were a little bit more details that you're still trying to figure out, and they'll get back to you. But it's really important that you as board members are not the individuals that are problem solving with your constituents, other than getting them to the right administrators or the right staff members within your district. You will inevitably be told hearsay or rumors or told, and I'm sure you already have been dealing with this, that something is going on and that nobody is handling this. My suggestion to you, again, rather than to try to figure it out yourself, is to make sure that your administrators are aware, There's a rumor that this is happening. There's a concern about this. To the extent that you can get the problem solving started with the proper administrators, that is very important. You'll also want to remember that there are likely two sides to every story, if not more, and there may be a lot more information than the person who's reporting it to you has access to. There also may be a lot of information that you cannot share, even though it feels like you would want to be able to say, no, that student wasn't expelled, or no, that student wasn't suspended, or no, that teacher is on a leave of absence because of their cancer diagnosis, or because of this or that. They're just things you're not going to be able to share. And so making sure that you're getting into a habit of letting people know that unfortunately there are things that we just cannot disclose to the public. But suffice it to say that we've got policies in place that are designed to address the issues that you are having a concern about, and that we have the right people in place in order to address those, and that I followed up, or that this person will be able to take care of the situation. That is very important for you to kind of get into the habit of addressing. In addition, you're going to want to make sure that you are, in fact, not sure exactly how to say this, but you want to make sure that you are not sharing any kind of rumors or hearsay, or commenting on them, or carrying water for the individuals, and making sure that to the extent that you can help kind of address the situation by indicating that you've got the right people in place to address it, it preserves your right to serve as that impartial body, and then it puts into place the chain of command that you've adopted through your organizational chart and through the positions that you have filled. You want to make sure that you are not redisclosing any information, or that you are not disclosing any information that you have special access to simply in your position as a member of the board. Any questions about that? That can sometimes be quite a challenging situation. Okay. Moving on, and I know we're running out of time here. Open meetings law, we talked about this very briefly at the beginning. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but suffice it to say that the open meetings law is something you should become familiar with, and make sure that you know kind of generally speaking what is expected of you, and to ask questions. All open meetings start in open session. And then there are times in which you can go into closed session by virtue of of what the law allows, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a second. We want to be careful about walking quorums. Walking quorums are something that are situations that occur inadvertently for the most part. The open meetings law defines meeting broadly. It includes communications between a quorum of school board members through technology, or through verbal conversations that occur. It simply occurs when there are school board members who talk to another school board member, who talk to another school board member, to the point where we get to a quorum of the board. And it's not just that one-way communication. There's nothing wrong with two school board members getting together and having a conversation before a meeting, or a school board member having a conversation with one school board member and then another school board member before a meeting. What a walking quorum does is has one school board member basically carrying the discussion from one school board member to the next school board member to the next school board member, that essentially robs the public of the opportunity to witness that robust conversation and debate that is supposed to happen at school board meetings. So if I, for example, I contact Craig and I tell Craig that I'm thinking about voting a certain way at the next meeting about, I don't know, let's stick with offering mental health services to students, because I know that's an important issue. And I tell him, this is what I'm thinking of how I'm going to vote. And then he tells me, yeah, I can support that. I think that's a great idea. And then I call Tom Mooney and I say, I had a conversation with Craig. And Craig and I both think that this is a good idea. What do you think, Tom? And Tom says, I'm not sure that I can get behind that. I think I need a little bit more information. And so then I call Kate and I say, Kate, I've talked to Craig, and Craig and I are on board. Tom's a little on the fence. Kate, what do you think? And then suddenly we've had this whole debate, this whole discussion about providing mental health services to the students in the district. And it's all happened outside of the public's view. And so we get to the meeting and there's no discussion and everybody just votes and the public wonders what happened? When did those discussions occur? And it really is important for us to avoid having those discussions happen outside of those meetings, either in public as they're supposed to or in a properly posted closed session, so that the public sees that we're going to be having that conversation in closed session and then coming out, and then it's not a surprise that we're not talking about it in much more detail during the open session. Now, that's not typically how it happens in a verbal setting anymore. Now what happens is that it's done by email, and it's done by reply all, or it's done by text message. And so we have to be careful about, using technology in a way to, again, rob the public of the opportunity to have that robust discussion, or to witness that robust discussion between school board members. That's not to say that no school board member can email each other. And that's not to say that we won't sometimes send school board members logistical emails. We're going to be meeting at 7 o'clock tonight, be prepared for X, or here's something to review prior to the meeting. It's that reply all, or it's that continuous discussion that happens after that initial communication happened that then creates the issue under the open meetings law. The hardest part about this, and the time when board members learn the lesson the hard way, is when that discussion has happened through technology, and then we get that public records request. And the public records request is for those communications between board members. And as we're reviewing those public records, we realize, oh no, the public records that we've been asked for that we need to disclose actually do reveal an open meetings law violation by the board. And I'm often asked the question, since the release of this information, the release of these records will implicate the school board members in violating the open meetings law, that has to be a reason why we can withhold those records from the public, right? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, that is not a legitimate basis for withholding records. And so we want to be careful about how we're using technology, number one, because we want to avoid violating the open meetings law, but number two, we also don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're basically handing someone the evidence to use against us in the context of a response to a public records request. Very, very briefly, as I mentioned before, closed sessions are the exception to the rule. The rule being that all meetings are to be held in open session unless there is a specific reason that is blessed by the statutes to allow us to be in closed session. These are not all of the valid purposes for closed session, but these are the ones that we use most often in a school district environment. 1985 1A for judicial or quasi-judicial matters. That's typically when we're having an expulsion hearing. 1985 1B is for an employee discharge case. 1985 1C is when we're talking about employee compensation or evaluations, and that is about a specific employee or employees, not employees generally. If we're talking about employees generally, a policy governing employees, compensation for employees, that is done in open session. 1985 1E allows us to meet in closed session to deliberate or negotiate the purchase of public properties or conduct other business where competitive or bargaining reasons require closed session. The best example I can give you there is that sometimes we'll meet in closed session and talk about the purchase of an item. Maybe it's a piece of property or negotiate a salary for someone. And you will say to your administrators, we want to settle this for no more than $50,000, but why don't you start around $10,000? If you had that conversation in open session, giving someone authority between $10,000 and $50,000, guess how much you're going to pay for it? You're going to pay $50,000 because that's all happening in open session. So we are allowed to do that in closed session. We're allowed to address personnel matters or other investigative matters in closed session under 1985 1F. You are entitled to confer with legal counsel about a strategy regarding litigation or potential litigation under 1985 1G. And then 1D is one that we just started using a couple years ago when we realized that we needed an exemption to go into closed session to discuss crime prevention or threat assessments in the school. So, we're not required to have a discussion about all of the different ways in which we might address an active shooter situation or some other threat to the school district in open session. 1985 1D allows us to do that in a closed session. Closed session procedures, we won't go through these in any detail. This is more of a resource, but suffice it to say that you're voting on going into closed session. And you are going to make sure that that vote is recorded in a way where you can detect who is voting for the motion and who isn't. That's typically done in a roll call vote. You're allowed to take action in closed session. That's a kind of a myth. It's not preferred. You certainly should be taking action on items in open session unless the reason for being in closed session also applies to the action that you're taking. A good example is a student expulsion hearing. You're not returning to open session to vote to expel a student. That is all done in closed session. You want to be real careful about whether you are taking action or reaching consensus. To the extent that you want to have a decision by the board, someone needs to make a motion, there needs to be a second, and you need to take action on that motion. If you are simply kind of gathering consensus, figuring out whether the board, generally speaking, is supportive of something, that's helpful, but it certainly doesn't dictate what your administration or others are going to rely upon. Action is really the only way in which the board can specifically direct something to occur or prevent something from occurring. Last but not least, and I'm not going to spend any time on this as I mentioned before, I wanted to simply provide you with a resource. There are a number of statutes that exist that govern the code of ethics or the ethical responsibilities of a school board member as it relates to financial interests in public contracts. So your official actions as they relate to your personal benefits, and to the extent that you are in a situation where you have a spouse that works in the district, or you have another family member who works in the district where you are financially interdependent with that individual, you want to be careful about taking action regarding their contracts or the benefits that they're receiving. To the extent that you are working for an organization that is also contracting with the district, there are times in which your affiliation creates a conflict of interest, time in which it doesn't, but we can go over that on an individual basis if you have those questions. And I mentioned the code of ethics for local public officials, but also the criminal statutes. This is not something that comes up very often, but it's very serious when it does. And so in the event that you are in a situation where you have a financial interest in a public contract, or where you are exceeding your authority as a school board member, we want to be very careful that you are not inadvertently or intentionally violating the criminal statutes, because that comes with significant penalties that can be very challenging. And last but not least, school board members are some of the greatest volunteers in the district. They are often interested in pitching in when things are difficult, when we need a bus driver, when we need a chaperone, when we need a substitute. You want to be very careful. It is impossible under the incompatibility of offices and positions doctrine to be both an employee of the district and a member of the school board, and in some cases to volunteer without implicating this doctrine. And so to the extent that you are volunteering in some way, shape, or form, or want to be employed in the district, we should talk about what is more important to you, serving on the school board or contributing to the district in that other way, and we may be able to figure out a way for you to do so that is compliant with the law, or it may very well be that we need to postpone your volunteer or employment with the district until after you've served your term as a school board member. Any questions? I know that is a lot of information, But we really just wanted to give you kind of a taste of it, and to the extent that you have specific questions about how it impacts you personally, I am happy to have more detailed conversations with you on an individual basis or as a group during another session.
Anything, Tom or Bruce, you'd like to, any questions or comments for Shayna?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Shayna for coming in tonight. I think it's invaluable information as a member of the board. Secondly, there's several takeaways that I've written down here, and they're takeaways that I think we as a board can talk about at a future date.
Yeah, and I would just say, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. This is something that I wish I would have had even at the beginning when I first took office a year ago. It would have been very helpful, though, again, the Wisconsin Association School Board gave some very good presentations, materials that we went through, so it's helpful.
And like Shana said, if there is any specific ones, you can funnel them either for next couple of weeks to me, and I'll funnel, make sure you get the answers, or you can funnel them to Aaron, and we'll make sure you get the answers. So, thank you,
great.
Shana.
Thanks very much, Shayna. Great to see you again.
Good to see you also.
Travel safe.
Thank you. Just got a couple of blocks.
That's right.
That's the beauty. Okay.
Thank you.
Then we will move on. We have consent agenda items. The consent agenda contains the minutes from the June 4th special meeting of the school board, the June 6th regular board meeting, and the June 7th special Board of Education meeting. It also includes our latest financial transactions. Let's see, and those are, we would request approval of general fund vouchers 177695 through 177959 and 291713 through 291748, and purchasing card transactions dated 4/21/22 through 5/20/22. We also have some professional staffing recommendations, and we have other personnel items that are unnecessary for vote. I would look for a motion to approve or accept the consent agenda item as presented.
I move to accept the consent agenda
Okay.
item as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Now, we have one public comment this evening. We have an in-person visitor, Tiffany Shields. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Both of these joining us up here, would you be comfortable with me soliciting the
That's
community
fine.
if they'd like to?
Sure.
Just one moment. Feel free to come up
Oh,
and have a
right
seat.
here?
Yes, right there.
Absolutely.
Okay, if you'd like to make a public appearance by speaking to the board, please utilize the Q&A portion found at the bottom of your Zoom window. In the Q&A, we would ask that you type your name, address, subject of interest, and whether you have discussed this item prior to the meeting with either a district administrator or President Howery. After submitting the information, I would then transfer you over to speak to the board. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I am a crier, and I'm going to really try hard not to cry, but I may. And that doesn't mean anything other than this is really hard. Super hard for me to be in this space, and it feels really good to be in this space. And please know that my purpose for coming here is truly from my heart and for the betterment, and really from reading your blogs, Mr. Anderson. I've never met you, but I appreciate your blogs because even though I've never met you, I would know you from your sharing. I'm a writer, and I feel writing really helps us to connect and to get to know people without ever even meeting them. So I came here tonight. Hopefully, I'm going to try and be really concise, but that is not my forte, and I understand if you might have to say tip enough. But it's important, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't. I haven't been to a school board meeting since a few months after I resigned in February of 2019, when I read a letter to the parents and students who I served, because I wasn't able to send that to them, because I wasn't able to write it in the time that it needed to be done, because I wasn't really in a place to be in my heart at that time, and I needed to write sincerely to those people who I served. And I felt really good about that letter. And after I read it to you all, I put it in the newspaper, and that was the best I could do to get it to them. And so I'm all about, if something is important to me, I'm going to make sure I do it. And so that's why I'm here. And so the 3 blogs that why I'm here, and they all connect to me, is the blog on, and I'm not going to know a lot of this because to be honest, I haven't delved completely into everything, but the one is the strategic plan on, I'm going to lose all my papers here, but with the strategic plan equity pillar. And it's about the mission to provide students and staff what they need to succeed when they need it. And then to provide an equitable learning and work environment to enable students and staff to reach their full potential in the school district of McFarland. It's a great mission. And I'm really here because I want to bring awareness to ensure that you get there. And I mean, I worked here for 24 years. You don't work somewhere that long unless there's something you connect to, right? So I really appreciated being here, but it wasn't always easy, and teaching's a really hard job. And the thing is, I have nothing to prove, so I can be honest, that was a hard job. When I came in '94, it was 4 grade levels, no curriculum, I was on a cart, and I taught every kid in the building. So imagine trying to communicate with that many people, and you know, I will be honest, I was burnt out after a semester, but I was young, so I stuck with it, right? And by the end, we had a program that aligned with the high school that served kids to get college prep started early. So it took us time. We also got a French program in here, and that was not well received in the beginning. Took a lot of school board meetings. And so I'm pretty driven if something is important to me. And so I like this mission because I don't think we're there. And part of it is because my own experience, I know we're not there. I don't think there's an equitable work environment sometimes, or even for students because of my daughter. You know, I had my daughter go to school here, obviously, because I worked here and I believe in it. So it's a great place, lots of opportunity. But no matter what, it doesn't matter where you go, whatever job, there will be challenges and there will be things that you got to look at. And in one of your blogs I read, I don't remember which one, it was like sometimes we got to listen and hear the things we don't want to hear. And I feel like in my job I can take ownership of I was not stellar at everything, but I really put my time into the areas that were important to me. And when I left, I feel I was the best teacher. For me, what was important because I evolved. And as a teacher, what I came to realize is I teach students. I didn't teach Spanish. Spanish was always secondary to students first. And some people would maybe disagree with me, but I'm now doing real estate, and I just closed on 2 properties with Spanish-speaking people. And my Spanish was not stellar. I had to use Google Translate a few times. It doesn't matter, you know. I'm making connections, and that's what I really wanted to reinforce to the kids. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm not perfect, and that's why I'm here. So that mission is part of it. The board policies is another part. You wrote a blog on policies. I'll be honest, never looked at policies ever until a long time after I left. And that only came because of a colleague pointing me in that direction. The only reason I learned about open forums here, which is awesome, was from a colleague, former colleague. I would have never known. He was the one that gave me the idea, if you really want to read your letter, Tiffany, if it's important to you to get it to the families, go to the forum and read it. And you all gave me a standing ovation. It was like a really good night for me. Really good night for me. So I wrote this because I didn't want to go rambling. So I appreciate being able to come here this evening, having an open and welcomed opportunity to use my voice to be heard, and to be heard is meaningful and valuable. As a former educator for 24 years in this district, a parent of a 2021 McFarland graduate, and a community member, it feels inclusive and supportive for that, and I thank you all. Allowing people an opportunity to show up and speak up, if desired, is a real asset and key, I believe, to overall success with true collaboration and connection with growth, restoration, and healing if that is needed. And honestly, I'm here for all of those reasons. Whatever I'm able to share this evening, I'm grateful that I brought myself here and that I'm showing up. I'm here tonight because I really do care, always did, and it's important to me. And so those three things I wanted to discuss. And the first, the one that is probably my biggest one, which ties into, I think if we hit the feeling supported, you're gonna hit the mission statement of equity, because it's the support that makes the biggest difference. So feeling supported, what does it mean to feel supported? Dr. Anderson said. I think feeling supported is knowing that you have people around you that have your best interest at heart and will stand up for you in moments of need. We all have a need to feel supported. In a school system, this looks like staff supporting their students and their families, administrators supporting their staff, the board supporting its superintendent, and the community supporting the board, administrators, and staff. We all need to know that when difficult decisions need to be made, that someone is standing beside us and willing to help us when assistance is needed. And obviously, I had those experiences. But for me, teaching's hard because people are not going to be happy all the time. And just because someone's not happy or content doesn't mean there's a problem. I mean, it's a problem because the person's unhappy, and we have to talk about it and see if both people can come to some consensus, or you restore the relationship or whatever. And sometimes you can't, but you try. But my big thing is, as a teacher, I feel a lot of times, from my experience, there's so much priority in making sure that discontent person is happy. And sometimes it's when their concern isn't even valid. Maybe, you know, like we give them the power before we really know everything, or before we've really verified that their concern is legit. And so feeling supported, I'm gonna go backwards a minute. So I was nominated for the Cole Award, which I got this plaque that says the heart of education, which is very meaningful to me because everything is at the center of love. If you don't got that, you got nothing. And so really that's why my teaching changed, because I came to realize a lot of kids are not open for learning because they have a void. And the void usually stems probably from something early in their life, or maybe they're in a home where there's nobody there to really guide them or teach them that they hold all the power. So these kids look outward for everything, and they feel inadequate. And so they're empty. They could give it a crap, sorry, less about academics, because they're just not open. And so we are only going to make headway with them when we first educate them about love. That's my take on it. So I tried to bring that into my classroom a lot. In fact, one of the biggest compliments I got when one of my last students said to me, she goes, you know, you're a really different teacher. I really like you. I like all the other ones too. Everybody's different in their own special way. But for some reason, you're teaching Spanish, but you always have me looking at myself. And then that, for me, that was like, I was doing what I want. That told me I was achieving my goal. One other kid came in. I only got to teach him a few classes, but he said, I heard your class is like Spanish, but it's teaching you about life. And again, because I was trying to bring the two together, because I think, I don't know, as a teacher, I think we have to do both. And so when I was, my colleague, Melanie Neal, is the library media specialist, she nominated me, which was amazing. And that support, like when somebody recognizes you, I can't tell you how much more you will get out of that person. And then I was endorsed by Mr. Tarnitzer and Mr. Johnville. And so my former Spanish teacher, from the time I started until I left, she was with me the whole way. My last conversation I had was with her to help me decide what I was going to do. And she said, when Tiffany began teaching in 1994, the school district offered 4 years of exploratory Spanish classes with no connection to the McFarland High School program. Tiffany worked tirelessly advocating for and finally succeeded in implementing the current middle school world language program that offers students opportunities to explore Spanish and French. And I could go on, and I won't. I'm just trying to, I'm setting a precedence here. I'm sorry if I'm taking long. Another former student of mine who honestly struggled in my class. If you were to define his success by grades, you'd say he was a failure. And yet the kid went on to do AP Spanish, get a minor in Spanish. He now owns like a farm and is using his Spanish regularly. And he's amazing. And this kid said, I'm honored to recommend Tiffany Shields. The cool thing about this kid is he wrote for me twice. When he graduated as a senior, I was the one he selected as a teacher who made a difference. To be a middle school teacher and have a high school student choose you when they're done, I can't even tell you. I've read this so many times. But he goes on basically to say, I remember towards the end of high school writing a letter to Miss Shields about how she inspired me to learn Spanish. At that time, I had completed AP Spanish and proceeded to minor in Spanish in college. In her class, I could tell she had a love of the language and a passion for teaching it. Her skills and passion really inspired me to continue learning and eventually become fluent in Spanish. And then that brings me to Mr. Tarnitzer and Mr. Jondal. So they said, as the principal and associate principal, we have the privilege of watching Tiffany Shields bring Spanish to life for our students over the past 9 years. Tiffany is a reflective, dedicated, and creative Spanish teacher who truly represents the spirit of the award. She's a student-centered educator who knows her students and their strengths and needs in and out of school. As students stated when giving her the Teacher of the Month award, Ms. Shields is responsible and empathetic with her students. Ms. Shields is respectful to students having trouble with Spanish. It's this approach that leads students to take Spanish year after year. So that feels really great. But then why would I leave? And, you know, there's lots of reasons. The job's super hard, but I wasn't going to leave in the way that I left. I'm a really dedicated person. I had kids that would come and see me every day after school, at-risk kids. And I understand those kids, and abandonment does major damage to those kids. So I would never just leave and not say goodbye. But that's what I did. I didn't say goodbye to anybody, not even my colleagues. I think 1 or 2 people knew. And that's because I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I emailed. I sent a lot of emails, and I asked a lot of questions, and I didn't get any answers. So without the answers, that was my answer. I can't be somewhere where I'm not supported, where there's not going to be communication, because you can't have a relationship if it's one-sided. And so there was no opportunity to restore. So that's why I chose to leave. I know my value, and I'm a hard worker, but I'm not going to be somewhere where I got to keep proving myself. You know, that comes with the job, but when I talk about proving self, I don't know how to explain it. It was never the parents. It comes down to the response to parents, and we need to do better in that area, I think. And I'm not a mean-spirited person, I'm just being really honest. So I'm not going to get into everything, but there's a few things that are important because I want you to understand why those board policies are so important. I think they're great. I've looked at them a few times, but I didn't look at them until long after I left. It took me a long time. It's been a hard path, really hard path, but it led me to a good place. And I think the hardest part, nobody would understand the difference of resigning versus retiring. Or resigning sucks, because you lose a lot. You feel excluded. You're treated that way too, actually. I wanted to get the link so I could watch my former colleagues be celebrated for 25 years. I never got a response. So of course that reinforces shame. That reinforces you're not a member of the family. I went to take a gift to someone months after I left, I don't know, 5 months maybe. And I waited till school day ended, but there was a root beer float sale going on, and when I got there was a teacher up front, she's like, Daph, I told her I was going there to bring a gift as a surprise, and she said, well, go on in, go stand by her door and surprise her, she won't even know you're there. So that's what I did. And there was some of my former students by the door, but it wasn't teaching time. We're talking, it was like a minute before the day ended, it was a Friday. And I was respectful as I would always be. I said, hey, obviously it's awkward. I never said goodbye. It was just as awkward for me as it was for them, but I feel like I handled the situation quite well. I just said, hola, buenas tardes, feliz viernes, and then I was like, I'm hearing wonderful things about you from Mr. Rowley. And you couldn't have landed a better teacher to transition from me. And I said a couple of compliments and I left because it was awkward. And then I went directly into her room, and that was that. And I received communication later saying that my presence makes people uncomfortable. I needed to wait until 3:50 to be able to go there. Well, my daughter's a student in this district. Obviously, I'm going to be in these spaces, so it just is like, I understand sometimes, but it's like, to me, there's like thinking about things. Sometimes, I don't know, we just have to kind of get in our hearts a little more about things, and sometimes it's okay to be uncomfortable. Nobody has any clue of how uncomfortable I've been. Imagine showing up to sporting events. Feels like all eyes are on me. I dealt with that for a long time. I literally had a lot of people shame me. I had people yell out the window, she got fired. I mean, you have no idea sometimes the things that I experience. But my point of all this is I'm not saying there isn't areas for improvement. But to me, what led to me choosing to leave, there was some things that shouldn't have happened. And that's why I needed to come. Because you have the policies there, but I didn't know about them. And when you're in that place, like, I was in a very demeaned place. I felt very less than, and I felt, I don't know, I was not in a good place. But yet I still knew my value, and I stood up for myself, and it just, the answer was I needed to leave. But I don't feel like it was fair, all the shame in a sense that I feel went along with it, because it wasn't mine. I mean, there was some parent concerns brought to the attention in the year that I left. More than, like, in the 24 years I was there, it wasn't like I had problems all the time, but like in one year you might have one, then another year not, then another. But it's like some of the concerns were like a kid wanted to drop my class and the parent wasn't happy. I offered to work with the kid, I did all these things, but this person gets used as a reason why I need a plan. And that was hard for me. It's like, but the main thing is I would meet each time when there's concerns brought up, but at the end of the day, I always said, I want to meet with these people. I want to sit down and meet and have a conversation. I never got to. That was never honored. And then I'm supposed to be having a meeting because I didn't respond to an email. And again, I'm here for awareness because I'm a very responsive person. I was observed on November 28th. One time, my administrator, Mr. Tarnitzer, was in my room one time that whole year in which I resigned, on November 28th. And I was supposed to respond to a reflective prompt. And he sent me the email, and I responded at 8:13 that night, and I couldn't find the spot I was supposed to respond to. And then he said, well, we'll talk, I can show you tomorrow when we meet with you. And I had to meet with him because I had a Sprigio. Somebody sent a Sprigio about me, and the Sprigio said, Ms. Shields fails to educate her students. She fails to see the error of her ways, something like that. And I'm not ashamed to say that. Somebody said that about me, because I know I was a good teacher. But anyways, I had to go and meet about that. And the thing was, I'd already met about some other concerns. It was a really hard year. Spiritually, I think it happened to have me leave, because if you're not valued, you can't. I can't teach. Teaching, you have to be open and be vulnerable. And I was guarded and closed off because I felt so like I wasn't good enough. or I wasn't doing a good job. That's what was starting to happen. So after that email that I was supposed to respond to, it was a reflective prompt from this 15-minute observation. It was the only observation and the only time he was in my classroom. And I couldn't find it, and then he told me where it was in that meeting with him. Well, he sent me a follow-up email. I never opened it. It was one email, and I didn't open it because by that point, just to see the name, I think I couldn't handle another negative, so I didn't open the email. I'll be honest, that's why I didn't open it. But he would send 15 more, but I didn't know because in Google they go behind. So I really didn't open one email, but I was going to be disciplined because I didn't respond. Like it showed that I was unprofessional because I didn't respond. And so I was supposed to be coming to a meeting in this room on February 5th, and that was what it was about because I didn't respond.
Ma'am, I wouldn't want to be rude, but normally comments are 5 minutes and yours are 15.
Okay, so let me wrap it all up. So things happen, but the point is I go into that meeting and I was presented with a plan that was never brought to my attention. Things that I had said, hey, I want to meet with these parents, and I was told you don't need to follow up, everything's fine. And how does that happen? And so things like that shouldn't happen. And the thing was, 2 years before I tried to meet with the superintendent, and I was asked, did you let your administrator know? And I said yes. But then he sent me another email, asked me the same question, and CC'd him. So it's a feeling of like you're not able to. And then the last thing, which really ties this together is, so fast forward, my daughter's a student. There was a teacher in this district. I know he's retired a year ago, but the point of all this is I tried to let the superintendent, Dr. Bedell, know about this teacher. My daughter had an experience, extremely terrible experience in his class. She didn't want me to say anything because she was afraid. A lot of the kids liked, his name was Mr. Campbell. A lot of the kids liked him. And anyways, I tried to talk to him. After my daughter's experience, he called my daughter a bitch and told her to get out of the class just because she didn't clap. And I know that sounds extreme, but that really was what happened. Since that time, I've learned my neighbor, she put in her exit survey that he needed to be removed. There's a lot of different things that I've learned. And to me, there's an inequity when a teacher like that, you've got, I've met people not even looking. I sold 2 houses to people who had kids that had experiences and they filed complaints in the 90s. So how does a teacher like that stay?
Ma'am, those are,
I understand, but the point is I tried to meet about this teacher and I didn't get a response from Mr. Bedell. I wasn't coming as a teacher, I was coming as a parent, a concerned parent, and I requested to meet with him about my daughter, and I shared. I would never get a response. I tried to schedule a meeting, never got any responses back.
yeah, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
mine is that we try not to talk about people's names.
And
Because public setting.
I understand that. I think it's that sometimes it's putting it out there because, like, you got these policies, but where does anybody go with them unless anybody knows? So really, at the end of the day, what I wanted you to know is, if you want those policies to serve their purpose, because I would have used the process that's in these policies, but I wasn't in a place to seek help because I followed the chain of command, which you ask. But if you go to the final chain of command and there's no support or there's an alliance, there's nowhere for a teacher to go. And had I known about those policies and I saw those names of people that are go-tos, I probably might have done that. I didn't know, and years later, months later, then you realize it's too late. And so I think what needs to happen is for teachers at the beginning of a year, you really need to have somebody come and talk to them, almost like a professional development on those policies, so they're aware that if they're in a situation, this is set up. it's not like this happens all the time, but it does. And so I'm sorry if it came off as probably not, started off good, right? And then didn't end very good. I needed to be honest. And I have no ill regards, but it really impacted my life. I came back 3 years later. There's a reason. I'm doing really well at a new job, but the change in the fact that I don't get to have some of the privileges that other teachers that retired was really hard, because I think I deserve it after 24 years. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting yourself through.
And again, no hard feelings. I wasn't trying to be mean or disrespectful, but sometimes the truth needs to come out. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
We have not had anyone else register for public comment. Thank you.
Okay.
So we can go to the next item.
Let's go to the.
Mike Vole is going to present on the landfill proposal out on, off of Highway 18 there, across from the current.
We will
Thank
be
you
very
for
brief
waiting,
here.
by the way. We apologize for the wait today.
We will be very brief here. So I'm Mike Full. I'm with Neighbors for Better Landfill and joined here with Dan Parks, also with the neighborhood, or Neighbors for Better Landfill. We're going to present just a couple things that have kind of come out over the last month or so about the proposal. I know you all have been kind of briefly briefed by some of the landfill folks of what the proposal is. But want to kind of let you know some of the updated things since it is about 2,000 feet away from the planned McFarland School District land. So this will affect this board and this community quite a bit, and also some kind of updates as we know through the processes going through here. So a quick recap of a reminder, the city of Madison did sell the land to the Dane County. But that's kind of the start of the process here. They're now in the process of going through and doing DNR checks and environmental checks and things like that. So there's going to be some roles here where the school board will be in a position to speak out on behalf of the school district and on behalf of the community. So Dan's going to go over just some of the quick top line stuff. Obviously happy to take questions and dig in any of this. We don't need any of you to be a full expert on this, but want you to know at least some of the concerns that we have seen and that the community is talking about, so at least you have a sense of that. And then I'll talk about a couple potential kind of next steps the board could take if they wanted to, and then we will get out of here.
So just a little background on this presentation. I was using this more like a notes. So I haven't really practiced or anything, but I wanted to at least walk you through what my thoughts are on this. So this is one of the proposed plans for the area. It's kind of hard to see from where I'm sitting, but you see that little gray area right in between the blue and the red, that's where the landfill will be. And all the colors basically to the lower left-hand is going to be our future community. So really we have limited space to grow is my overall, comment on this particular slide. So if you go to the next one, many of you know this one. You're gonna be heavily involved with this, I'm assuming. But this is the community park and the school that'll actually be within that 1/4 mile of that landfill. So I want you to picture the current landfill literally across the street. That's what it would be. It would be across the street from that community center. All right, so I think just the visual aids in general, and I have one more that I want to show you, are kind of eye-opening. Just the fact that I asked the question to the DNR. Actually, I asked a couple of questions. I called the DNR. I'm a safety professional, so I call around and ask a number of things. I asked them how many schools are this close to a landfill. They couldn't answer. So what I did is I found out. I did my own research. I looked up, if you go to the next slide, there are roughly 37 active municipal solid waste landfills. There's actually, I think, 38. I went through my list again. I think roughly 38. And there's only 8 within 2 miles of a landfill. There's only 3 that are 1.5 miles. So what we're talking here is our future school being literally 1 mile closer than the closest school on this sheet. Okay, so that's my concern. To put it in perspective on this list with the current landfill, or with the current school, the intermediate school in particular, That would be 1.6 miles away from the future proposed landfill. And I asked if there have been health studies on these three closest ones. They said no. Okay, so that's kind of eye-opening and scary in my opinion. If you go to the next slide, these are the EPA citing guidelines for schools. Okay, and in these guidelines, I actually highlighted some. It says children will spend nearly a third of their typical day within 2,000 feet of a landfill. That's literally what it says. Our students are going to spend nearly a third of their typical day right across the street from this landfill. If you go to the next slide, again, citing guidelines, I can't read the fine print from here, but really what it says is pollution exposures is #1 on the list for why you wouldn't place a school in an area. So I think placing a school or having schools this close to a landfill would meet that definition of probably not a good idea. Okay, now, I don't know what the pressure's been like on the other end from the landfill side with this group, but the fact of the matter is that they didn't tell this community or even want to know about it. It's kind of a red flag in my opinion. Should be a red flag in all of our opinions, that McFarland doesn't even have a say in this, and we're gonna be the ones closely affected by this, more so than anyone else. So basically, Madison and Cottage Grove are deciding the future of this community in an area that can only grow towards the proposed site. If you go to the next slide, these are some health-related studies. I just picked a couple of many that I found online. There's a lot. Trust me, there's a lot. But I want you to pay attention to that top one. And it says, from Science Daily, it says health risk those live within 5 kilometers, so that would be 3 miles. So all of our schools are within a 3-mile radius, if it moves closer. Not to mention the thousands of residents in the area, not to mention the hundreds of homes, probably closer to like thousands of homes by the time we're done growing. If you go to the next slide, these are actual studies of existing landfills, and you can see that there are not good. These are of other schools, or other communities, I should say, not schools, but other communities that live near landfills, and it really affects children when they're developing. So if you look at some of these things, it says increased stomach, liver, lung, prostate cancer, increased bladder. I mean, you guys can all read, it's not good. So that's another concern of mine. We started out saying, well, it's gonna smell. Yeah, it's gonna smell, but it's more to it than that. It's actually gonna affect our health. If you go to the next slide, this kind of gets into the Dnr Wetlands. Again, that little dotted area to the right of the dark green. Those are like wetlands, marshy areas. And I can't read the table from here, I apologize. But needless to say, to summarize this whole slide, it is surrounded by wetlands. There are actually wetlands on the property. There's actually, if you go to the next slide, sand deposits on the under the golf course. It shows it right here. This was actually in the McFarland plans. I found this map on there. Where you want, what type of soil you want is solid, silt, clay. This does not meet that definition. That red area is where the landfill will be. So if you go to the next slide, this kind of brings it all in perspective. Okay, so what you're looking at here, that Dnr watershed is a high priority watershed, meaning any runoff from this thing will basically get into our streams, wetlands, then essentially gets back into our lakes. And just the fact that our Wisconsin lakes are already contaminated, it's kind of scary that they're even proposing this, to be quite honest with you. I recently just talked to someone who specializes in the environment, and she's highly concerned. And then you put the school there, that's literally what we're looking at. I mean, there's water markers, water indicators, you got a watershed. It's eye-popping. The more I dug into it, the more I couldn't believe that this was even considered. Add the fact that The golf course itself has drainage and flooding issues. Well, guess what'll happen with trash on top of there leaking over onto the watershed? It's highly questionable. If you go to the next slide, here's another one, even closer look. So all around the site, and I did circle it, you can't see it quite as well. But what you're looking at is hydric soils found in wetlands, right in the middle of where they're putting the landfill. You see the pond there that they're going to be taking out? That's called a navigable pond, but they're going to put an exemption in basically because it's man-made. They're not supposed to put them on navigable ponds. There's navigable ponds to the left of this proposed site. Now I called them, I said navigable ponds, well that doesn't meet, the DNR said, well it's man-made. Well, it was man-made in the 70s, all right? And it saturated the soil basically, is what I'm thinking happened. I don't know, it doesn't matter. It's sandy, watery, drainage issues. They're putting it right on that next to a watershed. Go to the next slide. This kind of gets into, these were just some links. So you guys, I don't know if you forward that on, Angie, to the group, this PowerPoint. Any of these links you can click on. I'm not just getting this from anywhere. I mean, these are true facts of this location. Lower Rock River Basin wide issues. There's issues with the Lower Rock River Basin. There's multiple river basins in Wisconsin, and this one's, there's issues with it, okay? And so I asked the question, so there's no mention of a landfill being placed on a potential reason for water quality issues. Well, the current landfill's on it. The DNR launches Healthy Watershed Initiative. Well, wouldn't this kind of fall into that category? I don't know. These are the questions I'm asking, and I'm getting very vague answers from the DNR, getting very good answers from this current environmentalist who shares my same concerns, because I was checking my own research with someone who actually specializes in environment, and she's very, very concerned. If you go to the next one. So I just put a list proving of this location. I just kind of number of bullet points. Wetlands all around, future elementary school, highly populated growing area, DNR neutral party, they're supposed to be. Does the DNR have Village of McFarland plans? Well, they didn't know about the school. I know that because I talked to them. I said, did you know there was a school? I talked to the air quality, the person's gonna be issuing the air quality permit. I said, just so you know, there's a school gonna be, she was surprised, she didn't know. So what is the landfill sharing with them from our community? Do they have these plans? I've been sharing them with them on my own. And they keep telling me, like, just wait for the permitting process, there's gonna be a time. So it's just been a stressful and frustrating process for me personally. And it's also frustrating that it's being sold as this sustainability campus when that's not what it is. It's to put on a public view of it being this great environmental thing. But when you're placing it in a location like this, it's not very environmentally friendly. The concept is great, we just think it's a bad location. So if you go to the next one, and Mike, maybe you can talk on this. This is just where the board and all the voting processes ended. So you all know about that, but I'll let Mike kind of
switch this over here too. Yeah, so kind of just wrap this up. One other piece I think is probably relevant to this board is in 2017, the current landfill, they did an air study to try and figure out why suddenly it started to smell, and there's a whole bunch to that that'll be coming out in the coming weeks as we've found some more information. But part of that study, they did an actual assessment of how the airflow works around that landfill and in this community. And they found a weird thing that hadn't happened in other areas, but there's best to describe it as a donut, where if you're right next to the landfill, it wasn't smelling. But if you remember, there was a lot of times in actually the city, in the village of McFarland, suddenly it started smelling like landfill. We couldn't figure out why. And there's this weird effect where because the landfill is where it is, the air was, on still nights, the air would start to heat and rise, go up over the, over the berm and all the local prevention, and then go about a mile down, and then cool, and then all the particulate and all the smell came down. At the time, we thought it was just smell. Turns out the particulate. So basically, we already have a study showing that this new landfill is going to take the air, it'll fly up and come downstream onto the school and into the village of McFarland. So I think that is a thing that will matter beyond just this proposed school location, as well as the intermediate school that's obviously already built. Is there going to be that additional impact? So I just wanted to clarify that it isn't just like, well, let's just not build the school. That probably at some point will be an impact here, but it will affect the existing infrastructure and existing community here. There's a reason that there is no landfill of this size next to a community of this size in the state, or as best as we can tell in the country. This is not a thing that's normally done. Typically, the recycling center, which is what they're calling the sustainability campus, typically the recycling center and landfills are separate. And that is, of course, currently the case right now, right? The landfill is in one spot, and then downtown Madison where the recycling center is, because you want recycling near the population so they can go to and dump stuff off, and the landfill far away from, as many people as possible. What they are doing is combining it, which is not a common thing to do, as best as we can tell, and according to what they have said as well. I also want to be clear that I know there's been talk about at a certain point you all might be able to be part of the negotiations. There is no legal obligation right now for the Village of McFarland or the School District of McFarland to be involved. About a dozen houses will be involved, and that's it. You have to, anything within 1,500 feet of the landfill. And again, the school owns property at 2,000 feet. So there's no legal obligation for you all to be involved at all. If we're lucky, City of Madison will be generous enough to invite you all to the table. But I feel like that's a pretty darn weak position to be sitting in, to be asked permission to sit at the table so you guys can ask for compensation and money on behalf of the community and residents and the school. So there's a big political headache that's about to head your way when those negotiations start in January-ish of next year. Again, we're in the early phases here of the land was just sold. There's a clawback provision where the county will be forced to sell the land back to the City of Madison if this falls through, or the City of Madison basically changes their mind. So that kind of leads me to the next step here of things this board can do, both on individual members can do, as well as a board. So first of all, obviously you can speak up here. We are very lucky that after the recent election, Patrick Miles is now board chair and represents this community. He, at the moment, does not see this as a big concern to the community because he has not heard a lot of complaints about this. He has started over the last month to hear more complaints because we've been trying to make a lot of noise, but that was what he initially said was, well, this thing's going to pass. He hasn't heard a lot of people complaining about the smell of the current landfill or seeing this as an issue. So I recommend all of you, if you have a relationship with him, or if not, I would recommend you call him and let him know this is a problem. He did, on the most recent round of the county board, he was one of 2 other county board members to vote against the landfill, but that was on his capacity as an individual member. He pushed it through committee and he assigned it to the schedule for vote, and at any time could revoke this entire process if he wants to, because again, as board chair, he has a lot of behind the scenes power, as you all know, as local elected officials. He just currently does not see that as an important need for our community, and I would hope that as community leaders, you can stand up and make that request of him, that this is just, as more information has come out, we should change the direction of this plan. The other things that you should be aware is the AFT local president for the Village of McFarland, Angie, now I'm blanking on her name, I apologize.
Angie Bazan.
Thank you, I apologize. It's been a long night. As well as the statewide president of AFT, Kim Kolofs, has both signed letters asking that the county and the city stop and slow this process, because obviously the teachers are going to be very much impacted at the new district as well as at the current locations, as well as all the students and living in the village as well. But yeah, again, I asked if you're willing and able to help contact Patrick Miles, if you want to take action as an official board, that would obviously be good as well, or at least as individuals. I would hope that you all would help strengthen the community's position here, not immediately cave and say, well, we'll just sell off the land for pennies and not try and build a school there, and we just won't complain or anything like that. We hope that you all stand up and make quite a bit of noise that you are about to be sitting on property that's going to be very difficult to build on and currently have no seat at the table or any say to negotiate on behalf of the community. And then finally, there will be the opportunity to weigh in with the DNR if and when that process happens. It will probably happen quietly and quickly, and we're doing the best we can to figure out what the timelines of things are, but there's various licensing, scheduling processes and things like that happen. if you'd like to engage your attorney to help get involved in that process, we'd be happy to share the information we're getting from our lobbyists and potential attorneys and things like that as well. I imagine the Village of McFarland will also have some legal representation in this process, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity to make noise over the next 6 months and get people to understand this is a bad idea.
Just gain support.
Yeah.
I think the more people find out about it, the more support this will get against the landfill being here. All they talk about is infrastructure costs without giving numbers. What are those numbers? It's just unfortunate that a handful of people thought of this idea.
Right.
It's gonna affect our whole community. And we didn't even get into the devaluation, which is not
Right.
the next step, obviously, but I think the more people that find out about this, the more support we will get. And I actually, finding out all this stuff, the people I'm starting to talk to environmentally, I'm getting more and more confident that I don't think this will go, personally. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm more confident than most. But they're showing all this confidence that this is a done deal. Well, I'm gonna show confidence it's not. Because I'm sick of that.
Yeah.
I'm sick of them dictating our community, to be quite honest with you. And I just want more, we just want more support in our effort towards pushing back at this thing.
And then
So-
finally, to wrap it here, then happy to take questions, but there's also, I think, been a little bit of messaging from the pro-landfill folks that there is no plan B, that it has to be here. That is not the case. Happy to dig in more. There are other locations, there's other ways to do this. They just are very excited to not have to relocate they can just move across the street from where they are now, and that'll be fine. There are other options, and again, they may be forced into other options depending on how the DNR stuff shakes out, but it's not like we just have to suck it up. Again, there's no other community in the state that's being asked to make a sacrifice like this. There's no reason why we should just quietly do so without making some noise. So happy to dig in with any of this or answer any questions people may have.
Anybody got any? Bruce, Tom, do you have any comments or questions for
I
the?
have one comment, one question. First of all, thanks for the wealth of information you provided tonight. It's been very comprehensive, far beyond what I've been able to capture through the media. So thanks for letting us have a better understanding. My question is this: do the realtors in our village have any role in this?
Yes, they can weigh in. We've had several realtors sign on to our volunteer and committee and things like that.
Are you asking like devaluation questions?
No,
What
I'm
will
thinking of
the devaluation of our community?
their future
I can tell you
sales
that.
on what's going to happen here.
So, as far as realtors go, there's studies that state, there's multiple studies, that show that property values within a mile are gonna decrease value with about 7.9%, roughly 8% devaluation. You do the math on a $600,000, $500,000 home, that's a lot of money. Up to 2 miles, I think it goes down to about 2.5% deduction on the property value. Directly next to the landfill, I think it's around 12.9%, 13% devaluation in the study that I found. I have a whole nother PowerPoint with a whole bunch of information I can share with you if you want. It's just a bunch of links and just kind of my use of notes.
Yeah, the main issue that we've heard from folks is absolutely as we said early on, this area was supposed to be where McFarland is growing into, and all the more so because the current landfill was supposed to be capped and run down over the next 5 years or so, or next 10 years. And now Village of McFarland growth is going to not be, you're not going to be able to grow. The school district land obviously is going to be devalued there. The other thing we haven't really dug in too much, in addition to property values and particulates and all that stuff, this location is also going to have composting, which even the current landfill does not. And they've already stated they don't currently know how to control the smell of composting, but they'll probably figure it out.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know how anybody's going to want to be anywhere near that thing.
Okay, thanks.
Bruce, have you got anything you'd like to ask? Okay. Megan? Kate?
I don't have any questions right now, I don't think, but this has been really informative, and regardless of where it all ends up, I appreciate your dedication to our community. That's 100% visible. And thank you for doing the research. That's really important. It helps us make decisions, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. It's definitely been eye-opening, and, I mean, just getting this information out to the public is gonna be very important, so.
That's what we're working on now. We're
Trying to
We're
make
not
some
done
noise.
We, it might have been a month or so ago, we had a village board, school board
Yes.
meeting, and a gentleman, I apologize, I don't recall his name or whether he was with the city or the county, but he was there, hat in hand,
Oh, yeah.
to apologize to the village and the district for not including either entity in the planning process pre that day. The reason they gave was because there's no McFarland structure or residence within 1,700 feet, or I don't know what exactly it was,
So
the
that,
distance, and that's why they didn't include us.
I know who that is.
They did, however, commit to keeping both village and district boards abreast of any new developments that should
yeah.
come out.
So that
for whatever it's
gentleman
worth.
is the head of this current landfill project.
Yeah.
About an hour and a half later, he presented on the city council meeting at the city of Madison. And when we brought up our concerns that the village and the county and the school board had not been informed, he informed the city, no, they've been completely informed. Here's all the different public notices we've had. We've sent out postcards to neighbors after we forced them to do. And it was the complete opposite story about how informed you all have been. And so that our concerns should be ignored and they should move forward on the vote today. And that's what they did.
They've been kind of pushing us around, saying the same things over and over again. I've listened to these individuals talk a number of times. They say the same thing over and over again. They got their nice, clean talking points, but they always have the last word. I can never say anything after.
Yeah.
And that's been the frustrating part.
Yeah.
It's like
When they,
it's like acting. That's what it is. It's,
yeah.
you know.
When they come and present at the village or here, they talk about how it's not a done deal. They're looking for community input. This is just one plan. There's a long process. And then when they go back to the city and county boards, which we were at those meetings to speak at, it was a complete inverse. There is no plan B. We have to move forward. The local community's already been involved. There's only a handful of people who are concerned. And it's their fault for only finding out recently. So it's been certainly frustrating for all of us that have been part of those.
Well, obviously, we appreciate your coming out to speak with us this evening, and my apologies for the timing of meeting pre your appearance, but
Thank you for hearing
it was
us.
certainly informational, and we look forward to what's going to happen over the summer, especially, maybe pay a little closer attention to those issues.
Yep, we'll keep in the loop as hearings and things come up too, so you all know when there'll be opportunities to weigh in.
Please do.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you
all.
very much.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to do my best to shepherd the next few items in a very few minutes. All right? So,
Good luck.
You
Yep.
just wanted your last one to be nice and long,
Wanted to
right?
go out with a bang.
The longest one since he's been here, sure.
yes, well, especially since I have longer, doesn't make any difference. So, to go first, yes, this is my last school board meeting tonight. The next ones are up, next one will be in July with Aaron, but you're in good hands, so no problem with that. So, and Aaron knows if he ever needs something, he can give a call and, I'll tell him, here's my thoughts, you can take them or leave it, but if there's anything anybody needs, I'm going to be available to help. The policy review process. One is you do have, and this was something Mr. Mooney asked about, first, I think it's important that you do review your policies. However, I will tell you from practical experience, a couple things. One is you have Neola. If you make major modifications to those policies, you will lose the legal assistance and backing that those policies provide. So, what one might be a better idea is, if you try to do it at board meetings, at your 2 board meetings a month, you'll never get through it, and it'll make your board meetings much longer and tedious than you'd want. What has worked in the past is if people want to create a board committee of 2 board members, then some administrative staff, and potentially, since Scott Brown is your Neola representative, to go through and report, and then if there's certain changes, for then that group to bring it back to the full board for your first readings and second readings and changes. That's one way to go through your policies in a much more expeditious manner, because if you try to do it at your board meetings, it's just not feasible. I've never seen a board be able to do it yet, because after a while, you just get bogged down. If you can make it your entire, if you make a special committee for it, you know, then they only concentrate on that, and then they bring it to the board with an update.
Okay. Tom, any comment?
Yes, and that was not my intent at all. My intent of having this on the agenda is this. I'm not sure what the process is now, the frequency of reviewing existing board policies are. Could you just sort of summarize what our present process of reviewing the policies are? It used to be one cluster in the spring, one cluster in the fall. Is that the
Well-
same as it has been?
I can't, for this year, we have, the policies that we've dealt with have been policies that we wanted to, one is, there's standard policies that Neola, as legal representative, wanted changed, so we made changes. So we talk about those, or we talked about individual policies that we wanted to make specific to McFarland. One was, the latest was changing the seniors so they only take 6 classes rather than 7. So, but as far as systematically going through, that we did not do. And I can't speak to anything that was prior to this.
Well, I can. Like I said, we would have one large cluster of policies in the fall, one large cluster of policies in the spring. And I'm not sure what the cycle is or was to review the policies. If we reviewed, one cluster every 3 or 4 years, or the frequency I wasn't quite sure of. But this is what I'm getting to. When we do review board policy, if we do it in clusters, instead of twice a year, I'm requesting that we further divide both of those clusters into 4 clusters. I have no intention of setting up a committee. Neola does a great job for us. But as a board member, I think it is our responsibility to be aware of the policies. And we do have to approve the policies periodically. But I'm not sure how the others feel about it. As a former educator and dealing with board policy over the years, and then as a board member, I just found that the board policy clusters were really insurmountable. We had the first reading, and then the second reading would come 2 weeks later. Really didn't give us a lot of time to take a close look at that. And as Shana has reported, policy making, policy monitoring is really a major point, major responsibility that we have. And I would say, Craig, what about your input into this? Because you've gone through the different cluster reviews. How have you found them to be?
Difficult, for sure. There are times when there are, and I don't want to demean the importance of the policies, but given the events of the last couple of years, it's been even more difficult to spend virtually any time reviewing policies, knowing full well that we should be. But we just didn't have the resources at that time, or the time, frankly, to do it. I like the idea of smaller groups of policies being reviewed at one time. I think the chance of everyone familiarizing themselves with 4 policies is a heck of a lot easier than familiarizing themselves with 20. And those are the kind of clusters that we've been dealing with a couple of times a year. It is necessary, absolutely. It's our responsibility. It's time consuming. I think maybe at some point, the summer months might be a good time to review those policies. You know, when we have a little less kind of school business going on day to day. Frankly, not sure. I haven't given it a whole lot of thought. I think I know where you're coming from, Tom, and I don't disagree. It's going to be difficult to come up with a practical solution. I think maybe we should involve Dr. Brown and just see what his thoughts are on the best ways and the most probably expeditious ways to get through these policies and make sure that what we have is what we need, and there aren't policies hanging out there that are outdated or irrelevant or not topical in any way. I don't disagree. I don't.
Yeah, but realistically speaking, Craig, we have spent very little time as a full board during a board meeting to review the policies. That's not my issue specifically. Rather, most of the review has been done between the board meetings, which I'm very comfortable with. You know, so when we come to the board meeting, we have a general knowledge, not an expertise with board policy, but just a little understanding of what it's about. And if we can have your board policies to take a look at for one period of time, I think it would do us justice. But again, I don't anticipate any extra work. It's just that the existing work that we have and spreading it a little more.
Bruce, got any ideas? Any input? What are your thoughts?
No, the only thing that came to mind was I was wondering if Aaron might have some suggestions. I mean, he's got a lot on his plate, but yeah, I guess I have so much I could say. I don't even know where I'd begin. It's what it is frustrating about being a board member, and you're supposed to be doing all this, and it's like the amount of information we're supposed to digest is just almost staggering. And yeah, I don't know what we can do, but Tom, I think it's not a bad idea, just trying to break it into manageable sized chunks is what you're saying, basically. But you know, maybe Aaron, you'd have a suggestion. It might be something you can think about. It may not be something we you know, decide on tonight.
You know, this is just for discussion anyway for tonight.
Right. Correct.
Yeah. What's best practice for how often you review them? I don't know.
Well, you have quite a few policies. So realistically, if you tried to cover 10 policies, you know, to read them, to have a discussion. And most of your policies, depending on length, are 2 to 3 pages. You know, it's gonna take you
Takes time.
over between 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Is that what most school districts do? Like
No,
every,
most,
like,
I've had to rewrite the policies in several of my districts, so usually what they do is they create a committee, and then we go through drafts, we explain it, bring it to the board, but it, you know, it takes at least 1 year, usually 2.
But
I'm sure
again,
Aaron will have lots of thoughts and time to think about it.
Yeah, I think it'd be wise just for me to have a conversation with Dr. Brown and just discuss some ideas and options with him. I agree, you want to have it to be a manageable workload, so, you know, to be honest, you have the time to do the work that you have been asked to do and volunteered to do, and so I don't want to create a process that is, makes it feel like you're just checking a box, you know, and just going through the motions. But also, you know, the thing is when Neola does the recommendations for the changes, they're done meant to be in a timely manner, based on how things have changed. So there's going to have to be a kind of a balance, I think.
Actually, I think it might behoove us for both you and I to sit down with Scott and
Sure.
see where he's coming from on this.
I agree.
But again,
That sounds smart.
that everyone knows what I'm requesting. I'm just requesting to break the large clusters of policies into smaller clusters.
Yep.
It's no additional time on part of the full board. I'm not talking about revisions at this point, new board policy. It's just to take a look at what we've done historically speaking. And to be honest, I think sometimes it has been. We've just checked the boxes without even reading the board policy. So but it should be a good discussion.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Tom.
Memorandum of understanding with natural circles of support.
Yep.
All right. What, this one basically is just covering from January 1st of this year to June 30th, so the time period's already passed. So that we can do one that goes from school year to school year, which is what we thought was much more appropriate. So this one is just, we're asking you to approve something for what we've already done. Coming in July, Aaron is going to do a presentation with Dr. Jeffrey Lewis and Christine Primenow that will basically lay out, here are the things and the expectations we have that will be done in the next year. So, next month, very important. This month, quick to pass.
So was the document that we were looking at, was that already approved before and then the time frame was just changed?
No,
Or
they had, actually, you didn't have anything yet for this year because the last one was ended, the last one that you approved ended December 31st, 2021. So there's a much longer explanation, but trying to get one. We've been working diligently on a process that we think we now will have one that reflects the school year, so everybody's on the same page of what needs to be done. This is just a stopgap to make sure we can get there.
Okay, so what you're looking for is approval for the time period already passed?
That is correct. Yep,
That- Okay,
and I wrote you.
I got it.
Yep.
I got it.
All right,
Okay, I'll go ahead and make this motion.
I do have one more question.
go ahead.
You go right ahead then.
I did notice in there that there's a deliverable on June 23rd. Are we on track for that? Yeah?
Yes.
Cool. I love that there were built-in updates and presentations to the board in it. That's really great to see.
Yes, so we have our next meeting together on Wednesday of this week. So we meet at least once a week, these last few weeks. There's been some times when it's been less often, every other week, depending upon what's going on, but.
Yeah, I think it's critical everybody get on the same page regarding how this entire partnership is being handled, so. Any other questions or comments, guys? Tom?
Yes, I have another
Go ahead.
comment, one question. Under the section labeled schools/principals, it seems like the principals are going to identify youth advocates by 23-24, okay? But then under the section financial commitments, it talks about the district will hire a youth advocate to lead the mentoring activities in the district. Those are separate positions, is that correct?
Yeah, so the idea, the youth advocate is one position or multiple positions. So those are one and the same. The use of the term youth advocate just refers to somebody that would, as we move on from the grant, work through the grant, and we're no longer, natural circles of support wouldn't be facilitating the mentoring circles. It would be facilitated by a district employee, and the term that we're currently using is youth advocate. So it could be, multiple people, just spread out in different buildings, or it could be one person that is doing the work in multiple buildings. We haven't determined that.
And that was my question for that. So, and then my only comment is, they have three main goals listed. And my background, again, is SMART goals. I can see where they develop these goals, and the outcomes are really the measurable pieces. And I certainly can live with that. It's just a different format than what I'm familiar with because of the maybe inability to measure some of the things that they're talking about.
We are in the process of finalizing an evaluation plan. And that's where Dr. Privenow is really a great asset to us in terms of what measures we will use for those that are involved in this work, pre-post measures. So I'm excited to share that with you in some time in July. Great point.
Anyone else? Okay. I will move to approve the memorandum of understanding with Natural Circles of Support for the time period of January 1, 2022 through January 30, 2022.
I will second that.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on, action on 22-23 Professional Staff Employee Handbook.
And this is what Jeff has been working on with the SZRC committee.
Support staff.
Yeah, SZRC.
Scissor.
So we did move the other one to, we just got some things from the attorney we want to evaluate, so that's not on agenda tonight. So these are things that Mr. Mahoney has worked with his committee for the changes that we would ask you to approve.
Oh, yeah, I've got it here. Any questions, comments for Jeff while he's kind enough to stick around with us?
And I do have one question.
Go right ahead.
Under section 4, labeled leaves, holidays, and vacations, subset number 2, bereavement leave, and talks about due to the death of, father, grandfather, uncle, aunt. Was there any consideration of including foster child in any of those lists? The reason why I ask that is that historically speaking,
We do have language elsewhere, and I can find that. I might not have it at the moment, but
well, as long as you think they're elsewhere, I'm okay with that.
Good point, Tom. Thank you.
thank you for bringing that up. That is also in the professional staff handbook about fostering children.
Anything else? I would go ahead and look for a motion then, if someone would care to do it.
I move to approve the changes to the 2022-2023 Support Staff Employee Handbook as presented.
Kate?
I'll second.
I'll say Tom, second.
Okay, Tom? Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action on appointment of 2022-2023 medical advisor.
And Tom Merwin has volunteered to do it again. This is a non-paid position that he's been doing. He did this past year, he has done it previously. We've talked with him. He's more than willing to serve in that role again. So it's just, the board needs to formally appoint him.
Okay, any discussion? Anyone here? All right, hearing none, then I would look for a motion to approve Dr. Merwin as our medical advisor.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Bruce. Second?
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion?
Just a comment, Dr. Merwin is a real gift to the district. He's been doing this for many years, and certainly we appreciate the work that he did with us during the pandemic.
Very well. Well said. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action on what do we got? Private transportation contracts.
So one of the things that you're required to do is you either can provide transportation to private schools or you can have parental contracts. It is usually cost beneficial to the district to do the parental contracts, and you do it at the end of the year. So I'm sure you've done this for many years in the past. So this is at the end, so we are recommending the parental contracts for where parents have transported them to private schools.
Anything else to offer, Jeff? You got anything?
Nope, fairly routine,
Yeah.
and they are for private schools that are within 5 miles of our boundary, as we do
Okay.
not have any private schools in the McFarland School District.
All right. Any other discussion or questions? If not, I'd look for a motion.
I'll move to approve the 2022-2023 private transportation contracts as
Kate?
presented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Megan, second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action on recommended WEVA Destination Career Academy and Insight School, Wisconsin Statute 118.408G, student transfers to resident districts. This is a regular part of some of our agendas since some virtual students will be asked to be sent back to their home district for failing to attend or work in a virtual environment. A list of the students and their home school districts are included in the board packet.
So that's what we're asking is.
Anybody have any-
Fairly routine.
Questions or comments? This is a very routine action on many agendas throughout the year. Unfortunately, I guess.
The only comment I have is if you take a close look at it, we're sending students who are presently in kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade back to their districts. And I understand that. I just wish somehow we could capture these kids and their parents. So,
The second part of your comment there is probably the more significant of the two. I think virtual learning environments require, in my opinion, an extraordinary amount of commitment and time spent by parents in order to make that student thrive in that type of learning environment, I think.
and I agree.
Okay, anything else?
It isn't successful.
It is unfortunate, that's correct. I would look for a motion.
I'll move to recommend the presented students return to their home districts from the WEVA DCA ISWI as allowed under Wisconsin Statute 118.48G.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Matt, got Kate? Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We've got some board events. A regular school board meeting on July 18th is our next. And I think
Adjournment.
I would look for a motion to adjourn.
You're helping in? I'm doing my best.
I'll make the motion to
Okay.
adjourn,
All right.
I think.
Do I hear a second?
Before we second, can I just say thank you, Dr. Anderson, for all your work for us this year?
Yep.
We appreciate all
it's
the
been,
support you've given us.
I've enjoyed it, and I wouldn't normally be in a hurry, but I have to pick my wife up tonight before I go home to take care of the animals, so
Okay.
I'm sure she's going
All
to
right. I need
have
a
words
second.
for me.
I need a second. We've never not gotten a second on this motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Bruce. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0, and we are adjourned at 9:25 on Monday, June 20th, the year 2022.
And you are in good hands,
Oh, I
just
will
like
do my
Allstate
best.
Insurance.
Well, thank you so much for everything you've done.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm still here for the next couple of weeks, so.
That's right.
We'll see you in a more social setting. soon.
Yeah. So we'll do that?
Yep.
Hate to run, but I already know, I can already hear my wife.
Drive
Yeah.
carefully.